1966, the small town of Malinkovosk, Siberia, vanished without a trace. The town wasn't particularly isolated, as it had been just south of Norilsk, a large mining city with a population of around 80,000, nor was it disconnected socially, as people would often commute from Malinkovosk to Norilsk for work or to visit relatives and vice versa. Despite this, its initial disappearance did not make national news, and very few people outside of Norilsk ever found out. For all intents and purposes, Malinkovosk had never existed, and yet if you were to ask the people of Norilsk about the town, you might just hear another story, one of local investigations and government cover-ups, or you may hear nothing at all, as not all are liberal with their retelling of the story. I am Diego Gomez, paranormal investigator and journalist for the Slice of Strange blog and podcast, and today, I'll explore with you just what happened in this small Siberian town. Malinkovosk was founded in 1965 when Nornickel, the corporation running the nickel plant in Norilsk, had wanted to expand beyond the city to find other precious metals in the Arctic Circle, pushed on by the economic boom brought in by the Soviet Union. When asked about Malinkovosk, Nornickel will insist they went to the Talkskoy field, where they found the world's largest deposit of copper-nickel ores instead, and that Malinkovosk never existed. But we at the Slice of Strange blog have done our digging, and today I have for you an interview with the previous head of police in Norilsk, who served during the events that transpired at Malinkovosk. What you are about to hear is my interview with Dmitry Petrov, head of the Norilsk Police Department. I hope you found your way alright. The office tends to give people trouble. It was no trouble. In our emails before, you said that something happened, that the town didn't vanish quietly. Can you tell me about that? We had first heard about it, us at the police station, when the calls started coming in. Malinkovosk didn't have a proper police force yet, so we took the calls from both communities and had 2 or 3 officers stationed in or near Malinkovosk to respond to them. Why didn't Malinkovosk have a police force? It was bureaucratic stuff, I guess. Nornickel built a town, but it was technically just an extension of our town. It wasn't very far. Around 32 kilometers or 20 miles. I see. So you started getting calls about the town disappearing? No. The calls were about the mine. The mine was smoking. They thought there was a fire. What were they mining? It was a mess. Platinum, copper, nickel. I didn't know a whole lot about it, but they had found some stuff worth digging for and set up a camp. And then a few buildings and eventually a town. It went real fast. I think they had 500 people living there in the first 6 months. And by the end, well, there were around 9, I suppose. 100? Yeah, 900. But anyways, they called about the mine during the early afternoon. I don't remember the time exactly, but the mine, it had smoke coming from it. So we dispatched our officers and they started getting buckets and water. NFD was still in Norilsk, so the fire truck had to go the 32 kilometers to Malinkovosk. We didn't think things would get so out of hand. There was nothing to burn. The mine was almost a kilometer outside of town. No trees, but... Dmitry? I'm sorry. I can see it in my head again. It's not so easy. I understand. Do you need a break? No, I'm alright. I had been at the office. We didn't get much crime, mostly small things like disagreements gone out of hand, a bar fight or two on weekends. This was a Tuesday, everything was alright. About an hour after NFD dispatched the truck to the mine, things had gotten pretty quiet. We were getting worried because we hadn't heard back from our boys in Malinkovosk. They weren't answering the radio either, so we were gearing up to go down there. We were gonna take another truck too. Before we left, all at once the phone started going off, just back to back to back calls. Most of them weren't very clear, a lot of static coming over the lines, but they were talking about smoke everywhere. They said they were stuck inside, they heard screaming and couldn't leave. So we took the last 2 trucks and a car and hauled ass down there, 6 more of us and 5 firemen. The town caught fire? And that's what we were thinking. Even from Norilsk we were starting to see the smoke. The trucks couldn't go too fast on the dirt roads, maybe 30 kilometers per hour. We didn't arrive on scene until about half an hour after we left. A storm had started to whip up, blowing snow into the air so bad we couldn't see more than 5 meters in front of us. There wasn't mention of a storm in the forecast that morning, I remember that specifically. I thought the anchors were lazy bastards. By the time we got there, smoke was everywhere, mixing with the snow dust in the air to turn everything foggy grey. When we finally got eyes on the town, smoke had wrapped around the buildings like a snake, covering them and making it impossible to tell what was burning and what wasn't. They burned even during the storm? Yes, we didn't have time to stop and ponder on it, we had work to do. Though in hindsight, the fire wasn't all that was unusual. The smoke was strange. It wasn't rising into the sky, it stayed low, like a fog. It was almost like it was heavy, and couldn't get off the ground. We thought we could hear people from outside town, voices carrying to us through the whipping wind, though just barely. We thought they were, screaming. Dmitri is noted to have been shaking at this point, face pale and eyes wide. He was slowly becoming less and less legible over the recording. Do you need a break? No, I can keep going. How about we take a minute break? I've got coffee on the kettle and Clara should be done with dinner by now. Let's have a bite to eat, take a moment to prepare, okay? Okay. The recording cuts out. Allegedly, in 1989, a team of Soviet engineers, led by an individual named Mr. Azakov, began drilling for oil somewhere within Siberia. They drilled a hole 14.4 kilometers, or 9 miles beneath the surface before breaking into a cavity deep in the earth. One not filled with oil as they had previously expected. Intrigued by this discovery, they lowered down sensory equipment in an attempt to study this cavity. They found, in the brief moments before their equipment was burnt to ash, that the temperature inside the cavity exceeded 1000 degrees Celsius or 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. They also claimed to have heard the voices of the damned, screaming in agony and torment. Shortly after, the project was abandoned, and all data was either seized by the government or destroyed. This incident has since been dubbed the Well to Hell. Your wife, she makes a wonderful meatloaf. Thank you. Of course, you're her guest. So, where did I leave off? You had just gotten to town and told me about the smoke and snow making it hard to see, and you mentioned screaming. I remember now. This was mostly the firefighter show. We were there for support and to take people out of the city. The firefighters needed to find out what was burning and what wasn't so they could try to set up a control line. Stop the fire from moving anymore. When we went in, it was a bit easier to tell. I'd say around half the buildings were burning. NFD started working right away. A few of us digging up trenches in the snow between buildings to stop the fire from spreading to them, while they got to work spraying down the blazes that seemed the most out of control or likely to spread. The other officers and I had been wearing respirators. We often had to work with firefighters in Norilsk because of how few there were, so we already knew what we were doing and had gear that fit. 3 of us started clearing homes, searching for survivors, but there was nobody. Every building we went into, we found no one. Normally, that might be considered good, but we saw no one on the streets, no one anywhere. 1,000 people in this town and we didn't see or hear a single one. What about the screaming you heard before? Gone. The only sounds then were the fires roaring and the wood crackling and the wind whistling as it whipped past us, blowing snow and smoke into our faces. Could they have died in the fires? The idea that every person in that city, or even a majority of them, had died in the fires despite us having received so many calls from them under an hour ago seemed unlikely. We had thought they may have moved out of town in a group, stuck together and been waiting somewhere for us to find them, so Maxim and I split off and started searching the streets while the rest kept working. Walking through a burning city with low visibility? We knew what we were doing, what signs meant the fire was too dangerous ahead, when to fall back and when to press forward. At that point our biggest worry was that the people were trapped somewhere by the fire. We went a few blocks without a single sign of life when things started to get strange. More so than they already had? Yes. We had started to hear something in the wind, almost like it was carrying whispers to us. Incoherent but very much real. We followed them, the best that we could with the storm getting worse and worse, and soon we found ourselves at the edge of town. By now the sound was louder. It was singing. We could hear hundreds of voices singing in harmony, some not, but all seemed to be singing the same song. I had gotten excited, glad we found them, but Maxim, he was not so sure. "Why are they at the mine? The fire started there," he had said, but I told him it was fine, they were singing after all. No doubt to keep the children calm and make it easier to find them. What were they singing? I don't know, it was a joyful tune, but not one I recognized, and we were too far away to hear the words. We couldn't go to them, not on foot. Even with the dirt road, walking through a blizzard like that in an open field, you can get lost easily. We went back for the car. It took us maybe 10 minutes. We told the others what we had found and they wanted one of us to go back with the car. We didn't have personal radios back then, just the ones in vehicles, and they wanted to know what was going on and how soon a rescue operation needed to happen. We had hoped everyone could sit tight until they got the fires under control, but their safety was our priority. I was chosen to go back to them. They were gone when I got there. What? The people at the mine, they were gone. I drove to the mine and there was nobody there. I saw cars and thought they might have been inside, but the mine, it spat smoke, like the earth was vomiting its heat and rage into the sky, so forceful that standing at the entrance made me sway like a child in a storm. Even with my respirator, it stank of burning meat and sulfur. I had to resist the urge to rip off my mask and empty my stomach on the snow. I was preparing to return to the radio, thinking about how I would tell them what I found, what I could say to explain, when I heard it, coming from that mine, bouncing off the walls and ringing through the air. I heard singing. Dmitri raises a shaking hand to his brow, wiping the sweat from it as he speaks. I do not know the words. I was not good with the language. I didn't recognize it. I'm sorry. But they sang that happy tune again. First one voice, but many more followed it. It was so loud I had to hold my ears, It made my head pound. I knew I should have left, should have told the others what happened and waited for help. But I needed to know. I needed to know why our officers would go down this place without telling us, why the townspeople were in a smoking, stinking mine. I fought my way through the burning smoke and relentless singing walking into the mine. My respirator protected me from the smoke, but not the growing smells within. It stunk of charcoal, burning methane, and stomach-turning copper, and more than once I had to stop and focus on my breathing to stop from ripping my mask off and vomiting. It was hot. The heat was unyielding, the smoke blowing it into me, and at a few points I turned my back to it to give my front rest. The floor was wet and sticky. I couldn't see my own 2 feet, but something coated the floor that clung to my boots as I walked. I made it maybe 25 meters. I couldn't see a damn thing. The smoke was everywhere when the singing began to change. The singing was still a cheerful tune, but the voices singing it were not happy anymore. They screamed in agony as they sang, each word sounding like it would rip from their throats and silence their song. I couldn't bear it anymore. I ran out of that cave and back to the car. I could hardly explain what had happened to my other officers. They didn't understand, didn't believe me. Dimitri is gripping the mug of coffee tightly. His knuckles are pale white as he stares down at it intently for several moments. We didn't save the town. The fires were under control and then they weren't, like they had decided it was time. The whole town burnt down. And we never found a single body. Though rumor is when the Soviet armed forces came down and blocked off the roads, set up camps around the old town, they pulled bodies out of the mine. Mangled, burnt bodies, practically just bones. Why didn't this ever make the news? We weren't allowed to speak about it. People started to disappear from the town. Most knew it was the armed forces, but knowing what it was didn't make it any better, so we stayed quiet. Why didn't anyone try to leave? Spread the word elsewhere. You've heard the city is locked down, yes? No real roads, no trains. The only way out is through the airport, and you need permission to enter or leave. That became official in 2001, but it has been this way since Malinkovosk. Nobody leaves without permission, and if you were there for Malinkovosk, you don't get permission. How did you get out? I snuck to the port, 40 miles away, and stowed away on a ship. Eventually I made it here. Alright, well, thank you for your time. I'll make sure this gets out. Is there anything you want to say before this ends? Don't go to Siberia. Ha! You don't have to tell me twice. The recording cuts out again. I did go to Siberia though, and after some convincing, I was led into Norilsk for some artistic photography and a lie about writing an article about the better parts of life in Norilsk. There wasn't a road, but we did manage to find Malinkovosk, or the place it should have been. There was no town, no burnt rubble hidden under the snow, and no military camp or anything of the sort. But
we did find a mine.